careers in an unpredictable world. Before we move on to what the discussion is going to be all about, let me first introduce our stalwarts in education who have gathered here to share their experience today. I begin with introducing our panelist, Sir Aloysius de Mello. He believes that student is a seed of change and evolution. The way we perceive a student is how we perceive tomorrow. Thank you, Sir De Mello, for joining us today. I move on to our next panelist, Dr. Skant Bali. He is highly regarded as an effective school educator. He is a firm believer in the infinite potential of young minds. He mentors and adheres to the principle and believes education is incomplete without incorporating core values. He's currently working as a principal of the Hyderabad Public School. Thank you so much, Dr. Skant, for joining us today evening. We look forward to a fantastic discussion. Our next panelist is Father Vaghes Kachapalli. He is the principal of Rajgiri Public School. He has previously served as a director at various other schools. He believes that teenagers are increasingly influenced by the peer group, which extends to both physical and virtual domain. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to a lovely discussion with you. We move on to introducing our next panelist, Elizabeth Edwin. She's the correspondent of the academic group of schools by the name Theshtarum, and she's a passionate educator who believes that a change can be brought about only when we believe in our own self. I welcome you all to this session today on new age careers in an unpredictable world. So we all know that this pandemic is an agent of change. And now, more than ever, we live in a VUCA world. VUCA is a term that means volatile, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. As per the World Economic Forum, 65% of children entering primary school will end up in jobs that don't exist. And today, we are going to be discussing with all our panelists what is it that we need to prepare our students with, and how is it that we can move ahead in this journey together. So over to my co-host, Sapna, who will be taking on the first round of discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Rakhi. And thank you to all the eminent panelists and speakers who I've been interacting, and I know the kind of work you have done during this pandemic time. Uh, Moving on to what are the careers ahead, as Rakhi said, that World Economic Forum has already declared that the jobs will not be there. And many questions come to our mind. So I'll be just asking everyone to answer my first question, and we can go on with the second round next time. Second round, that is. So I would like to ask Sir De Mello that according to the World Economic Survey, like as Rakhi said, 85% of jobs that would exist will not be the new jobs which are going to exist in 2030. They haven't even invented yet. They are not there. How do schools and universities are preparing students for the unknown? And as I was reading about these jobs which are not going to exist, so some of them which I found were biofilm installer, digital currency advisor, drone traffic optimizer, then companion for the aged. So and it's all there on Google. So when we read about these kind of jobs, so sir, what is your opinion about how are you preparing, since your school is like we have seen that whatever NAP has been talking, we have already been seeing in your school since 2016. So what is that different stream you're following to prepare the children so that they're prepared to face the challenges ahead, and how do they select that?
Thank you for this question. It's very interesting to note what you have said. And I'm reminded of one of the seminars which I attended in Singapore, not in Hong Kong, about 4 years ago, when we had a gentleman who came up and asked 500 educators and told us very clearly that all that you're doing now is of no use. And we were quite shocked because all of us thought we were doing a very good job. And then he listed about 40 professions which were there, and he cancelled out about 32 of them and left only 8. And he said to us, within the next probably 10 years, only 8 of these would exist. And it was it was depressing for all of us because there were a huge contingent of principals and educators who were there. So when I came back to school, we really looked at this very differently as to what is going to be the future of the child. And we realized that a child needs to be street smart. A child needs to know the nuances of what's going to happen. The future will be an artificial intelligence. How do we move towards that? What are the subjects required to move towards artificial intelligence? What are the subjects required to move into biodiversity? What are the subjects required to get involved in what is happening today in a pandemic, a world with a pandemic? We should not be kept back as to not knowing what's happening. So we got all these things together, and today we offer subjects which will take the child into the next millennium. And I'll give you an example because IB has supported us tremendously as far as the introduction of mathematics at different levels, as well as its science at different levels, and made the things in such a way that we are in a position to see our children equipped for the tomorrow. So we've taken this up maybe 4 years ago, but we are implementing it in the present year, and then the last year we did implement it, but COVID hit us badly in that year. But this year we are implemented it, and we have many of the students who are going into these very odd like we call it odd, but the future, like many are going into specialize in artificial intelligence, many are going into biosciences, many are going into research into medicine, and a couple of them this year, very surprisingly, are going into vaccine development. I don't think we ever heard about it, but they are going into that, and they've taken subjects which will lead them into that. So I think I've answered your question, Sapna.
Yes, sir. So this is something very new, which I did not research on Google. Also, vaccine development is something which you are doing in your school.
No, we are not doing vaccine, but you've taken subjects.
Yeah, you've taken it as an initiative.
I wish we were doing vaccine. I would have given some to you.
Yeah, no, I know it's an initiative, but it is a very different thing which I came across.
Subjects which they are going through. It's interesting because the kids are very sweet, and they want to be pushed, and you can push them, and they accept being pushed, which is so lovely about the kids today.
So this is particularly you're talking about the IB curriculum, which has
in the IB. Now in the
IB, so this you're preparing
in the new curriculum in ISC, I'm extremely happy with the way the government has dealt with the new education policy, and we are probably one of the schools which has implemented this from the next year, and we are offering them different subjects so that you can view the world with not only one perspective. Like we had in my days, it was science, it was commerce, and it was arts. It's no longer that. So you can view it through different, a child can take economics with physics and chemistry, and pursue a career in both either economics or in science. So that's the advantage of what's happening today.
Okay, sir. So Sikand, can I ask you, what challenges does the fourth industrial revolution bring to the world of work? And how do we adapt the curriculum to match the changes which we need today? How does this happen, like in your school or not in your school in general? What is your take on this? Like, how are you preparing the students?
Sapna, I lost your question halfway, but I think I know what you intend to ask. See, I completely agree with what Rakhi said and what Mr. De Mello said. Future professions don't exist today. We are not aware of those kind of careers. But one thing definitely is going to be a game changer is, one is the liberal arts. I think the future belongs to the liberal arts, wherein, and second most important thing, which I've been talking over various forums, is that to make successful careers or successful generations in times to come, we need to look backwards. When I say we need to look backwards, there are certain qualities and traits which have worked 800 years back. Those qualities and traits are very much relevant today, and there is no reason why those will not be relevant in the unknown professions. Those are critical thinking, creativity, compassion, character, communication. And I think these are some of the traits which all the schools need to incorporate. To some extent, I agree with Mr. De Mello, but I would like to differ as well when it comes on artificial intelligence. Yes, technology is here to stay. Yes, technology is the future, but artificial intelligence, any which way, is artificial. It's not human. And that intelligence will also have a human trust or a human force working behind it. And we need to be very careful. I don't know how that artificial intelligence is going to unfold in future, but definitely the challenges which will be thrown before these youngsters 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the line are immense. So we need to make them mentally tough and emotionally strong. I think that's very, very important. We need to create individuals who look for opportunities in every possible struggle or any possible challenge which they face. So we in HPS have introduced farming in school. So our children are aggressively involved in the farming. They get to learn so much from there. We have introduced a department called Department of Progressive Learning, which exclusively works on these parameters of critical thinking, creativity, etc. So these are some of the steps we have taken, apart from obviously technology, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality. But I think we as educators need to create a kind of generation which is ready to face any challenge. Unfortunately, our generation and the generation who was just after us was not prepared to face the challenges. And that is one of the reasons why, if you see in our generation and the generation who was just after us are facing suicides, the crime against women has gone up, the crime at large has gone up. And I think all this has happened because somewhere in that British era of education and the curriculum, and maybe the independent India, which adopted the same way of teaching, did not deliver what was successful over the years. If you see Indian education system before British era, you would find it absolutely forward-looking education system, which was more research driven. I think we need to focus on those points. If that answers your question, I'm sorry I didn't understand your entire question. I couldn't hear it, but I'm trying to answer whatever I could. So I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, you did answer the fourth industrial. You did answer what is fourth industrial revolution all about and how you are preparing and how do you advise the students to prepare, and the future is liberal arts. So when it comes to that, so just a small thought, like, does it mean that liberal arts can be combined with like Kriya University is doing liberal arts and science together? So do you think that you are encouraging that sort of system also in your school or in your advice?
The possibility of running something like that in a school which is an ISC school, to be honest, is relatively very difficult, because still the Indian education system is dominated by the crux of the subjects you take. You can't have mix and match. But what I'm trying to say when I say the future belongs to liberal arts is, see, gone are the days when people used to produce engineers and only doctors. You may have a situation tomorrow where you might have an engineer operating on a patient, because you may have robotic surgeries. So you may have actually an engineer come doctor sitting on his dining table and having breakfast, but at the same time with the remote operating on a patient in the hospital as well. That's what I meant when I said liberal arts. When I say liberal arts, I'm not undermining the sciences per se. What I meant with liberal arts is the mindset of liberal arts student, the mindset of inclusive education.
Yeah, I got it, but I was just clarifying so that everyone knows that it's like you can combine and you can take when you are sitting on a dining table and you can perform a surgery with a major in something and a minor as whatever subject. So
absolutely.
My next question is to Father Verghese, because we have heard about two IB schools and IGCSE and CBSE school. So your school, whatever little bit I know, is a CBSE school, and I want to know, like, are we still preparing for them the job for the students for jobs for today, or when we should be preparing them for jobs for, or like what we have already discussed, that 2030 has got a different set of jobs and 2025 has a different set of jobs. So how are you? How do you think in a progressive state like Kerala, which has 100% literacy? So what is that different things you are doing to take this ahead with this new education policy, or with a different mindset? Because the Kerala also, whatever little bit I know, comes up with a different all the time with different thing. So what is the different angle would you like to give, Father?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So, as everyone knows that 2030, whatever we think will not exist. Whatever we think right now will not, most probably will not exist. So, I think we have to prepare our children socially and emotionally to face that 2030. Like they should be flexible more to adapt according to the changes that they face. We cannot stick on, we cannot just prepare and then produce some products as our children, but they should be fit to adapt things whenever they see some changes. And thankfully, Kerala is slowly preparing for that, because we understand the situation changes with tsunami, with the flood, and with this pandemic situation. People are becoming more realistic to the scenario. So even the parents and the society want their younger generation to be prepared for coming years. I think they should have more cognitive and metacognitive skills for their life. And maybe I will stress for their social and emotional skills and then balance of life. So definitely that they should be ready for that, and they should be, the students should be sensible to adapt the knowledge where they acquire, from where they maybe from the school they acquire more knowledge about things, but they should be sensible to adapt that knowledge to the changing situation. We have to prepare for them, and they should even they should have a strength in their mind to face the failures also. Things will not be the same as we prepare for. And definitely we as teachers and educators definitely should guide them. And I will say a word, accompaniment. Like we have to go along with the children. We have to go along with the children. We have to give freedom, we have to give them responsibility, and then we have to give chances to make innovations and then initiatives. But they should feel that we are with them to guide them, mold them. That's an important thing. So that's where we are trying to do our level best. As both the other speakers told, we have got I was just thinking, we have included 16 options for 11th standard students with a lot of combinations. Like even in science itself, we have got the combination of economics, psychology, and informatic practices. So we are just preparing children to face interdisciplinary way of education also. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Okay, Father, thank you so much. And I have seen the way you're preparing the students, because I witnessed it last year, how confident your students were when you faced this tsunami and cyclone which came in Kerala, and how you were changing the mindset with so many of them. And so I know what you would like to say. Vikram, like coming to you, just extending to this question that your university is university with interdisciplinary learning, and how do you think liberation of education will be like if you merge with these three topics? How do you think that liberal arts and science will fit together when we talk about jobs in future?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Sapna. And it's really a pleasure to be on this panel with such distinguished educators. I could not agree with all three of them actually, right? The kind of, it's easy for us to sit here and talk about this. But when we look at the scale in India, the scale at which, there are a crore students who graduate from grade 12 every year, the volume of education, the number of schools that we handle in the country, it's extremely difficult for people to understand what we are doing, right? Because, many times for parents and for a lot of students, they are the first generation school goers, college goers. So, I completely agree with Dr. Skand when he says that, that future is going to be, all of us have been talking about this, right? The future is going to be more and more unpredictable. So I'll give you my example, right, Sapna? I come from a small place called Sagar in Karnataka. It's a really small town. And post my grade 10th, I never knew what I should do. I got about 90% and everybody said that, you know what, you should be doing science because how can you do commerce after getting 90%? That was my thought process. And I did PCMC, right? Physics, chemistry, math, and computer science. And then I went into computer science and then I did marketing and management. And now I'm a counselor with education. I never knew I will be an educator or a counselor at that time, right? And I think most students don't know what they want to do. I think that's where the whole thing of, and Sapna, also to clarify to everybody who's listening to us, like liberal arts itself is not a subject. It's the way of learning. So it doesn't, like, it can be like a lot of times people think that it's something to do with humanities or social sciences. It's not true. You have as many liberal sciences as liberal arts. I think it's the way you learn, where you combine multiple subjects. And, and I was just reading this morning an article which said that education shouldn't focus on subjects, it should focus on challenges. And such a noble thought, right? I mean, when we're sitting in a biology class or when we're sitting in a physics class or an economics class, are we thinking about, what are we trying to solve with what we are learning? And to do this in K-12, as Mr. Skand said, is difficult, right? Because schools are more structured. When they come to universities like Kriya, obviously we can have ethics professor teaching them mathematics, but that's because we can do it. But in schools, it's that much more difficult. So definitely a liberal education would prepare you for sort of this unpredictable world, because, we all can agree on this, that in the future, what is going to be required? Skills like agility, adaptability, that we are not preparing you for one job or one designation. We are preparing you for multiple jobs in multiple industries. I think that's the beauty of liberal education.
So you said that I think my internet is a little unstable. Can you hear me? So your university is preparing the students with all these multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary subjects. So very close to your university is Chennai, and I would like to ask Elizabeth for that. That Elizabeth, like you said, that we have 4 institutes in Chennai. And I went and I spoke to a few people about your institute when I was in Chennai, and they are really one of the very good institutes, which I didn't know earlier. So how is interdisciplinarity in the term of education now in your system? Because that's supposed to be a belt where we really believe in PCMC or like whatever little bit I know about South, that we are very focused on either this way or that way. It can't be just joint factor from here and there. So what is your take? What do you think about the relevance of interweaving the arts and the sciences, and how are you just doing it for the children? Because whatever little bit we know about, I shouldn't be saying, but the people have that rigid mindset. The parents have that mindset that you take science or you take commerce and just stick to that subject. You can't just vary with subjects here and there. So how do you perceive the future now?
Yeah, thank you. I truly agree with what you say. First, it's only the mind which matters, right? When you talk about this interdisciplinary, and as you say, we with CBSE, we do not have that much of liberty to bring in, a lot of combinations and other things. We have very much limitations to do. But within the limitations, as father was saying, we try to give in whatever options that are given. But at the same time, when you talk about interdisciplinary, I think generally, I think we have to give in the thought to the children that because, as you say, we are facing this present world, the unpredictable world, where we cannot just be satisfied with just one single discipline. Because and as you say, when we go in for the jobs or other thing in future, as we were saying that 65% of the kids, when they enter after 20 years, they might not even go for the jobs that do not exist. Not only that, the survey says that in a lifetime, a person will have to change his career itself 3 times. It is not just going from one company to the other company or something like that. The career shift has to take place. So when you need to have a paradigm shift in your mind first, and the interdisciplinary, definitely the study of this is very much needed. And I think the education system should take this up very seriously, and not only, maybe I think that this is possible in the IB curriculum or the other curriculum where they can take a wide range of subjects. But in CBSE, we have limitations, and also in the other regional boards we have. But understanding the need for the future, because always there we grapple with questions of how we are going to prepare our children for the future. That is very, very important, right? So when we plan to prepare our children for the future, I think we have to think of all possibilities wherein we can take them to face the future very strongly. And not only with this technical skills that we are all talking about, facing the unpredictable world, but also there are other things also that we have to bring in the curriculum, like the empathy skills and social skills and their adaptability. And very first thing, as I feel that the whole educational concept should change from the sea to sea, that is from the cup to the compass. Like before, it was just filling up of the knowledge, but now it is not just a filling up of knowledge, but it has to be a compass. It has to be help children to navigate through the various data, they navigate to various options that is put forth for them. So I think we as educators and also policy makers should be very alert about these things and given these kind of options to children, so that they are not restricted to take up interdisciplinary options, and then so that they will be able to face the future very strongly and very boldly.
So that's what I'm asking. Like, we as educators and policymakers need to do the C2C model. But do you find it challenging in Chennai or in the institutions you work to change the mindset of parents, or is it very smooth?
No, definitely not. As we always see the mind, I think more than any kind of a revolution, a mind revolution should take place, because we always feel that you have to take a science stream. Taking a commerce stream is always for children who do not perform well, or it's like that. Even see, we have to tell parents, convince them. It's very difficult, because even the child who has no interest, no aptitude, the parents come and say, no, I want my son or daughter to do only a science stream.
So what are those wisdom nuggets you want to give it to the viewers who are watching and the recording, that how do you change the mindset? What are those small capsules of the wisdom which you supply to your parents?
Yes, see, actually, as Dr. De Mello said, during maybe in my days also, I had only an option of medicine or engineering or law or something, but now we are not in that state. See, when you look into the careers, there are about more than 78,000 careers which are around. And so to prepare your children for the different careers, you cannot stick on yourself to one particular stream. You should have that liberal mind. So we have to prepare our parents for that, tell them that, it is only the insecure feeling that they have, that if I take up this art form or something, maybe monetary wise, my child will not be successful, because at the end of the day, all we look in for jobs, because
So
and
you,
we have to yeah. So that
so you're
is not
finding it challenging.
so that is very, very challenging, definitely.
So any of you find it very challenging to change the mindset, Father or Damaris or Sikand, or do you find it that challenging? Or is it like the parents come with a liberal mindset? Because as she said that careers are being changed every now and then. And today's generation already, like my son has already changed. This is his 5th job and he's 28. He's already changed 5 jobs and he's ready and he doesn't mind it. He doesn't believe in buying so many things or buying a house, a property or anything, because he says that's the way life is nowadays. You think differently, I think differently. So do you also agree with all this? Because if he's 28 and if he is changing 4 jobs, what will the next generation be? With that, I'll ask Raki to take on this, and Raki, just take it further. And I would like this answer to come through something. Anyone? What if a 28-year-old is ready to take the 4th job plunge? What about the children who are now 10 and 12 years old? What do you think? Like, how many jobs do you perceive that they will be changing in future? What sort of careers will they be doing? So, any of you can answer, and then Raki, over to you.
I'm wondering when you're talking about the students now
Students,
or
students.
or 28 years.
No, I've heard that 28 years they've changed 4 jobs. The students who are now 10-year and 12-year-old, what is the future for them? What do we think? What will they do now? What does the new generation look
Let
like?
me
Because
tell you,
you all
Sapna,
are
the
heading
word,
such
the thought process has changed. The whole thought process. Now, you said your son is not interested in buying a house. Definitely he is not, because that's not his priority. You see, if you go back, let's say to a generation ago, the first priority was to have a house. Second priority is look after your kids.
Yes.
And provide for them. The present generation doesn't think of that. The present generation probably doesn't think that they need to provide for their children. You give them education, and it's their problem. The generation that we came from,
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to
would like to interfere in everything that the child does, which is wrong. And the present generation doesn't want to do that, because they give them the freedom to think. And finally, they say, in the end, it's your life. But look at where we are today. Is we like to control our children. Because I am an IIT, I must go to an IIT. No, it doesn't mean that at all. So what we do in our school, at least, and let me tell you from my school point of view, I realized this about 12 years ago. So now when I counsel the kids, the parents are not there. So we counsel the children when the parents are not there, and we zero down on what they want to do before the parents interfere. And once the decision is made, then we call the parent to tell the parent, listen, your child now wants to play the drums. You got to support the fact that he wants to play the drums. And at that point of time, it's very difficult for the parent to change the mindset, because it's already been changed. So, I mean, we tried that trick, it has worked. But the generation has changed, Ms. Sapna, it has changed tremendously. So what your son is doing is what a normal generation of today would do.
Yes.
You want to retire at the age of 45, would you?
Yeah. They all want to do that. Yes.
Yeah.
So anyone
that's what
else?
I think. I don't know what Dr. Bali or the rest of somebody else would think.
Yeah, I'm waiting. Anybody can answer. Like if there is something which we can learn from you, because you are heading big institutes and big universities. So it's just a curiosity which I would like to know from every part of the world. So anyone can answer. And Raki, would you like to ask 1 or 2 questions then? Or should I?
Sapna, if I can add to that, right? I think I completely agree, right? I'm today 30 and I've also changed 5 jobs. And none of us, I'm still not sure what I want to do. And it's fine, we live in that kind of a world. Today's children who are 17, 18, who come from school, they are, they are millennials. They don't know of an era before smartphones, right? They don't know when smartphones didn't exist. They were only 15 years that smartphones have been invented. the words like big data and AI and IoT have only come in the last 10 years, and they will vanish in the next 10 years, right? So, the workplace as we know it will change. All this that, I remember my father and their generation used to work in companies for 20 years, 30 years, they used to retire from a company. That's how long people used to work.
Yeah, same here.
And engineering degrees at one time used to be called 30-year degrees. And why were they called 30 years? Because once you do engineering for 30 years, you don't need to reskill. And today, the value of that degree has become a year and a half. By the time you graduate, there's something new that has already come. If it's a coding language, there's a new language that has already come before you graduate, right? It's just a year and a half that things change so fast. Look at any industry, Sapna. Whether it's mobility, how Olas and Ubers have changed the world. Look at Airbnb, how it's changing hospitality. Look at Tesla, that's changing, automobile industry, or whether it's like a Swiggy or a Zomato, which is changing the eating habits. I think every industry, because of the fourth industrial revolution, is forced to become a tech company. Look at education in the last 8 months, right? So I think the biggest thing that we can do as universities and schools is to teach them to be agile, teach them to be adaptable. Technical skills are important, but they're not everything. Like, you can't just do computer science and do coding and software development and web development and assume that you will have a job, because those technologies will change. But what will remain with you are more human skills. Skills like communication, skills like critical thinking, skills like collaboration. And this is what every study tells, right? In the future, what is going to remain is human skills. So because you look at anything around us, anything that is very clerical in nature, giving you a cup of coffee, buying a ticket, anything that is very regular will be automated. If not today, in 5 years. But what will human beings do is jobs that will involve more human skills. That's really, I think, should be the focus.
That's how we're meeting with human skills, because it's so. Rakhi, you have something, or
Yes.
should I?
So, as rightly pointed out by Vikram, that what we need today are jobs that will need skills. So this brings me to my next question to Father, that we know that we need to be focusing upon the social and the emotional skills of our learners, and we also need to train them to be prepared for failures, and as well as make them agile, flexible to opportunities. In such a scenario, what is the role that educators play when it comes to facilitating the learners in this VUCA world?
Okay. So thank you for that question. I should add to the earlier point also regarding this. Nowadays, we need to have a knowledge integration, I feel. So we have to synthesis, we have to have synthesis of mind. Now, we were speaking about, earlier we were speaking about the human resources, man. And then we moved to machine. But there was no much correlation with this man and machine. Like now people want a mind to apply. We cannot see man and machine a totally different concepts. No, we have to apply minds. Okay, unless and until we focus on the scenario, what is in front of us, and we apply it. Mr. Dimelo, was speaking about AI, and then unless and until the human apply their mind and then do some workouts, nothing will happen. So it is very important in this VUCA world. We should have a vision, and we should have an understanding that exactly speak about VUCA 2.0. So we should have a vision, we have to have an understanding, and we should have a clarity. Nowadays, we are speaking about, Raghu was speaking about the coming generation. See, now people are changing, maybe 28-year-old adult is changing his job maybe 5 times, 10 times. And we are worried about a 12-year-old boy or girl as our students, and we are worried about them. But I am speaking from their point. Even now, when I analyze my children, they want to be impressive in their age too. They want to be a qualitative life. And then they try to impress their teachers, their parents, and their society. So when they try to impress, they should have some backgrounds. They should have knowledge exactly. They should have a base for their life. Unless and until a proper base, they cannot impress anyone. They will not have any qualitative life. So our role as educators, give them visions, give them understanding of the reality, and let us, as I said earlier, let us be with them, understanding them. Why don't we, we are reluctant to discuss things with a 12-year-old boy. We just say, do that, do this, don't do that, go there. We give commands. Why don't we get time to discuss with them? What are your traits? How you are going about? How do you feel when we speak about some certain things? And why don't we have more understanding of even smaller child? Why don't we take care of their emotional traits, psychological aspects?
I think there's
Unless and
more.
until we educate this,
I was
unless and until,
sorry.
you can,
I just had a question. No problem. Go on.
unless and until we have got a complete involvement in a child, we cannot give any vision for him or her. So first of all, as educators, whoever comes in front of us, we should have a proper understanding. So for that, I should say, we should have knowledge integration. I can share an experience. My friend was working with the transgenders. So as a social worker, and I was asking him how things are, how do you manage certain situation? A certain situation we will not be able to manage when to come to the reality. We can just speak on about the things, but come to a situation and then reality we will not be able to. Then I was asking him. Then he said, to manage certain situation, we should have a lot of knowledge. It is not about the social work alone. We should have knowledge about biology. We should have knowledge about the law and order. We should have knowledge about the social scenario, how people accept these type of people. And then we should have knowledge about the people, like as I said, the sociological aspects and then psychology aspects we should know. So in this world, we should have a vision, we should have an understanding, we should have clarity about what we are doing and what we should do.
Absolutely,
And then,
sir.
yeah.
I think clarity is something that comes in only when the learner is guided well by the parents and the educators. And I feel that there is really a need now for a school for parents as well, where they go back and they educate themselves about how they need to raise children rather than commanding and getting things done out of them. So when we are talking about preparing them and igniting the passion in them, and also moving away to a more knowledge-based rather than certificate-based society. If we are talking about this shift in paradigm from certification to skilling, then my next question is to DeMello, sir. In your experience that you've had in education, um, do you see this shift happening from moving away from marks and the dependency on marks-oriented society to a dependency on skills that the learners will develop? Do you see the shift happening? Do you think that we parents are ready to see our children performing more on the skill-based parameter compared to the certificate, compared to the marks? I'm not able to hear you.
He's on mute.
No, can't.
Sir, you are on mute.
You asked me the question?
Yes, sir.
I didn't hear it, sorry.
Yes.
I really didn't hear that question. You
You
asked about marks versus skill-based.
Absolutely. So do you
That's
see
what you
the
were
shift
saying.
in paradigm happening soon?
Yeah, let me also tell you that a skill-based is very, very important, yes. But then how do you grade a child based on the skill? See, whichever part of the world you go, at the end of the road, you have an exam which you give, or let's say a test which tests your skills. And that is again correlated in terms of either it is alpha or alphanumeric, one of the two. So at the end of the road, whichever if you go to IB and they call it something else, if you go to IGCSE, they call something else. If you go to the CBSE, they call it something else. At the end, you're literally, governed by the fact that you have to go through an assessment, and that assessment will grade you whatever you are, whether it's skill based or whether it is anything that it is. So I don't think you can come out of the concept that you have to give an assessment. Yes, it can be alpha, and you need not bother about getting 100%. And it can be as it's done in the international curriculum, which is there is a grade boundary. So you're between, let us say, if you're an A star or an A, you're between, say, 80 and 90, and nobody knows what that 80 and 90 is. So to that extent, yes, it does affect. But you have to be tested for the skills that you claim that you have. And there's no way to do it except through an assessment.
So I don't know whether it is something which is in our favor for the VUCA world, or something which is actually going to undermine the learnings based on skill.
No, it doesn't undermine the learnings, because anything which is based on skills, if you have five persons in front of you possessing the skills, how do you grade the person who has better skills? Let's talk about debating skills or critical thinking, as Dr. Bali said. How do you grade the child? I mean, you got to be able to say that, let us say, Miss Chabria is better than Mr. De Mello. There must be a reason for it. So you can't just have everything. So there is an assessment which needs to be taken, whether it is based on theoretical knowledge or skills. And skills is of more importance. And I so much agree with Dr. Bali that skills are very, very important. How you speak, your critical thinking, how you assess a situation, how do you move in society, how do you stand up and speak. They're all skills which can never die out. The theory part of it will always die out. It'll come through with new things. But at the end, you need to be tested by an assessment, and based on that, your skill sets are valued.
Thank you so for your input. And my next question is to Dr. Skand Bali. How do we prepare students for careers when machines are already doing what we thought only humans could do?
It's a very closed way of looking at things, that how to look at the careers which machines can do. There are many careers that machines will never be able to do. Some of my fellow panelists in the beginning said that there is a possibility of a career wherein being an accompanist to the elderly, right? Now, machines have no role to play there. Machines will be controlled by human beings. I'll be extremely sad if we come to a situation like Star Wars movies where the machines are controlling us. That's a very scary thought. In fact, I was talking to one of the soldiers long back, and he said even he is equally scared of the machines. He said, because we were just discussing about the robotic warfare, that the future wars will be fought by the robots. And he said, Skand, the issue here is that when we go to war, if there is a wounded soldier in front of us, even if he's an enemy soldier, we have that human touch. We can make out a difference between an elderly, a terrorist, an enemy, a child, or a lady. Whereas a robot will be given the controls, and the robot may not be able to identify whether the wounded soldier is surrendering or whether it's a child the soldier is facing. So that can be a situation as well. So I don't see that we'll be totally dependent on technology. I think the human touch will always remain there. In fact, I feel that the demand for human intelligence will be much more than technology in times to come than what it is today. Like, for example, 10 years back, people did not talk about counseling so pertinently or importantly as they talk now, the need of the counselors. It will keep on increasing with the stress going up. So I don't see that. I think more of the such professions will come out where the human touch will be important and they will survive and strive. So I think the professions will be much more critical and creative in nature. Like there is a girl in West Bengal. I'm forgetting her name. She runs a company which has a more than 100 crore turnover, and they do cremations. They organize cremations for people. And the idea in her interview, she said, was that in big cities like Kolkata, Mumbai, Chennai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Delhi, people come from all over the country and they work there. And suppose if someone loses their loved ones, 90% times they don't know whom to contact. They don't know where to get the person who will read out the rituals or the prayers, etc. Which is the nearest graveyard or cremation ground and how to organize it, where to get the transport from. So she said, we do all of that. So what I'm trying to tell you by this example is that people are becoming more creative. They are not holding themselves away from the professions which were considered to be, done by certain kind of people or something like that. So in future as well, I see people coming up with lots of creativity, more ideas. Who thought 10 years back that WhatsApp will be ruling the world? Who thought that a 15-men company, YouTube, will be a sensation, right? So you never know. You never know. You really never know.
True. We never know that what's coming up next and what's going to be the impact of the same on the industry, or for that matter, education. In that case, Vikram, I would like to hear from you. How is Kriya University preparing or looking at preparing the learners in terms of upskilling them and also in terms of interdisciplinary learning?
Yeah, absolutely.
Connection, social connection is something that we are laying emphasis upon. So, the social emotional connection that we need to have in our learners. So how is it that Kriya University is evolving through that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest advantages that we've had, Rakhi, is that we have people on our academic council who are not just industry leaders, but we have academicians, scholars, researchers from around the world who are guiding us on what is to be taught. And the vision of the university is also that we create graduates with an ability to learn. I think how many people are today talking about that, right? I mean, so I think that, the whole proposition is to create thinkers. As I think somebody said that, right? That we have to go from the information cup to the, that's what it is, right? Universities, at one point where this place where you go to get a degree and from that you get a job, right? So these are places where you get information. But I think the role of a university is evolved. Today, there are 18-year-olds who are starting their own companies and saying, why do I need a university education? And on the other hand, you have people who've done their masters and can't find jobs. So a role of a university is also evolved. This is, so, as Raghuram Rajan says, that university is a free space for you to think, for you to creatively think and come up with, creative solutions. So Kriya has this concept of interwoven learning that we've pioneered, right? What usually happens is that in universities, you have academic degrees. Like suppose you want to do economics. You can go to St. Stephen's College, you can go to the Madras School of Economics, you can go to St. Xavier's College, wherever, right? So you will get very good academic degrees in economics. What liberal arts does is it has added a second layer, wherein along with economics, you can study, say, computer science and get into financial technology or get into consulting. Or along with computer science, you can study psychology and get into human-centered technology and work for a Google or Facebook, right? That's what liberal arts does. It is interdisciplinary. We've done a step ahead to that, which is called interwoven learning. What that means is that we truly interwoven the arts and the sciences. We've come up with guiding principles. So there are 8 guiding principles that guide everything that we do at Kriya. Things like writing intensive. So if you do journalism or creative writing, you obviously will have writing. But in Kriya, even if you do a biology or computer science or mathematics, you have writing courses. You have ethics as an important part of every program that we do. How do you take ethical decisions if you want to become an environmentalist or a sociologist? You have data analytics that is introduced. So even if you want to become a philosophy graduate or somebody in social sciences or the arts, you still have components of data, because I think data is today's language. So I think those are the ways that we're trying to truly bring in the arts and the sciences together. In many, many ways you see, as I said, right, like in a mathematics class, you have somebody who's coming and teaching ethical implications of being a mathematician. The recession that we speak about, the Great Recession, right? Why did it happen? I mean, people in the US borrowed more than they can repay. And that was because of these very lucrative financial products that were designed by mathematicians. So what about ethics to somebody who's learning mathematics? So I think that is one of the things that we're doing very differently to make sure students are prepared for this future world. They do their majors, they do their minors, but along with that, they do core and skill required courses to be able to have very holistic approach to problem solving.
Yes, I completely agree with you, Vikram, that interwoven learning is a need of the hour, because I feel that we as educators, need to be conscientious about what are going to be the emerging trends, and this can happen only when we are able to allow our learners to explore and give them the freedom to draw connection between diverse fields. So it becomes extremely important to have the element of interdisciplinary learning in almost all our schools. With this, I just have one last question, which is for Elizabeth, ma'am. When students cannot be what they cannot see, then how do we motivate our learners to work hard or to work towards a goal?
Pardon?
So my last question to you is that when students cannot be what they cannot see, in such a scenario, how is it that we as school leaders, as educators, are able to motivate our learners to work hard or to probably achieve their goal?
See, actually, as you say that we do not know what is going to be our future. Okay, but still we look at the unpredictable future. But what I feel is that more than preparing our children for the unpredictable future, we need to focus rather on the present, because I feel that our habits today shape our future tomorrow, and whatever values and virtues or skills, whatever you are going to give them today, will help them for the future, and that will help them focus on doing the right things now. So automatically tomorrow, that will be the best preparation for tomorrow. That's what I feel. So we have to prepare our children. See, do not scare them that this is how your future is going to be. This is going to be volatile. This is going to be uncertain. Rather than tell them how to live properly, as we were all discussing, as human beings first, with all the different values that we have. And automatically, I think when we instill all these different skills and values in them, the adaptability or the creativity or the social skills, the empathy skills, all these things, when it is fed into them, automatically I think they will be able to face the situation when it comes. That skills and that virtues and values which will be in them will make them ready to face whatever uncertainty comes to them. So definitely, that's why we say we have to teach children to embrace the ambiguity also. So this is very important. So once we teach them, and also more than teaching them, talking them about success, I think the need of the hour is to teach them how to face failure, how to experience failure, how to take it as a challenge, and how to go about it is very important, because that is where, because children always, they feel that everything should be right, everything should be good, but they have to feel the experience of something that is going to be bad. So experience that also. So give them all these experience, so that definitely I feel that whatever may be the future, we whatever may be the uncertainty that we face in terms of technology or environmental disasters or political maneuvers or any new social movements, but always we know that our society is surviving because of humanistic perspectives, empathetic citizens, and deeply principled people who bring in lot of changes and who are able to face the situations in the right way. That's what I feel.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
With that, Rakhi, I have a last question, which I want to address to all of you. And I am still, it's been few months that I'm trying to get the answer, and everybody is giving a different answer. So I want to know from all of you also, being in education and heading schools. So today also, like many students and many change makers, even they do IIT or engineering, or they do different forms of liberal arts, but at the end they want to become a civil servant. So when, because of their passion, because of the way the bureaucrats run the country, so they want to become that. And when they start preparing for that, so that rules out everything, which whatever we talk about is all one side, and civil services exam is one side, because it's all about just mugging up and just understanding the facts. And students, I have been seeing that I know a few students who have been locking themselves up, and the latest what are like few of our friends whose kids have gone through this exam, after the fourth attempt they have cleared this exam, and they said that forget about everything. If you want to pass this exam, you have to forget about all your, because I keep talking about the new age, the VUCA world has changed. And I said, no, VUCA becomes vision, understanding, courage, adaptability, rather than volatile. And so they said, auntie, all this is aside. This is what, if you want to become civil servant, you have to mug it up. You have to understand everything. And that's how these classes are doing so well. So I just want to understand, with the new education policy, with the IB curriculum, with CREA, with IGCSE, with CBSE, what do you all leaders say about it? That what should be the system like to crack a civil service exam? Maybe, and how should it change in future? Because we have leaders of different era now who are sitting with us, starting from Skand. Like I just went to your school, Doon, and I heard a lot from Hani Singh ji about you. So I just want to know, and Sir Damelo, I've been to your school, and Father, I've been to your school, and Elizabeth. So anybody who could just give, we'll just wrap it up after that, if you can, if you have an answer for this.
See, I'll just take it first. I'm not an expert to answer that question, because I've never attempted the civil services examination.
I'm just gathering these thoughts to
However,
make my own.
Yes. However, what I have read and what I've seen is, I think this is an absolute. I don't know who has said that they have to mug it up. I don't think you need to mug up things to deliver or crack a civil service examinations. It's a very well crafted examination. It has its objective question answers. It has an essay. Then you have subjective papers. So I think you have to be an all-round person, and plus you have a group discussion and the interview before you make it to the civil services. I have not come across most of the civil servants who are in that position after mugging up what somebody must have told you, because I think most of them have a very vast knowledge, and across the spectrum. There is a possibility maybe in future the government may take a call of modifying the way the civil services examinations happen. But I personally like the essay concept of civil services examination, because that forces them to read the editorials. So when they read the editorials in the newspapers, they
Especially
definitely
the-
broaden their horizons. So there is no, you can't mug up that. Similarly, general knowledge, and so I don't think it's mugging up of an exam right now. I think mugging up more or less stops at the school level. Even at the college level and university, you can't mug up the kind of answers you have to write. It's impossible for anyone. If somebody can mug up those big answers, I think they are genius. So I think it's very much a very extensive exam even today. But any positive change which comes from the government, I think, is more than welcome. But I'm pretty happy and satisfied the way the civil service examination is conducted, and I hope Government of India introduce something like Indian Teaching Services examinations tomorrow. That will be
Absolutely.
something which we need to look at.
Yeah, and I also hope that there are at least 2-3 exams which the child can clear, because in this, you crack one exam and your life is made for 60 years. So I feel there are so many changes, like in when you were talking about armed forces. So armed forces, at least we are armed forces, like being from armed force, we see that exams keep happening after every 4th year, or an officer has to appear for an exam to go to the next rank. So maybe something like this, which you're right.
That's with civil services as well. They have a regular upgradation courses which happen in their academies. For IS officers, it happens in Mussoorie at their academy, and for IPS, it happens in Hyderabad. They have to go. It's mandatorily, even in IS and IPS cadres, that they have to upgrade themselves regularly. The only profession where I feel in most of the cases is neglected for upgradation is teaching profession.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think we need to invest in that.
Yeah. So anyone else, or would like to? So
I
with
agree
that,
with what Dr. Bali says. It is not mugging. You just can't mug. I mean, there's a limit how much you can mug. Most of these children, try to go through these past papers and, keep, rotating it around. It doesn't work. And what he said about an essay and all that, it is the way the language flows, how you place the essay, how do you think about it. It's a huge learning. And it's just not. And finally, when you go to the face-to-face interview, all your skills are the one which matter. You can mug your whole book, but you can fail. You can be you can fail miserably in a face-to-face. So your
right.
skills are very important. I have not seen any IAS or an IPS officer who could mug and be there in that position. I don't think so.
Okay.
And I agree with him totally. It's a brilliant exam. Hopefully, as he says, and I agree with him, that in the future, if they have it a little more interactive type,
Yes, sir.
it will be better for many people, trying to appear for this exam.
That's what, sir. Because I was talking to some of the aspirants who are from good colleges and all, and they have a dream to crack this exam, but they said at least they should have a little bit more flexibility to allow us to appear. So that's why I raised this question, because it's not about like many people want to join and do good for the society also. With that, I think, Rakhi, we will wrap up this session, because we have we asked them to join a little early and it's already 6:10. With that, I would personally, Rakhi and I would like to thank each one of you for joining us and just sharing such valuable thoughts. And Vikram will be sharing the webinar recordings. We'll be sharing it with you. And thank you so much for joining us. And hoping to see you again in some session. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Vikram. Thank you, Skan. Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you, Sir DeMello.
Thank you.
Thank you very
you,
much.
Sapna, and thank you,
Very
Rakhi.
wonderful
Thank you so
insights.
much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Bali.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
ma'am.
Father.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Sapna.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Rakhi.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Elizabeth. Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you,
Vikram.
sir. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you.
Thank
Thank you. It
you.
was great sharing the stage with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.